Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of The Angry Astronaut, back with the United Kingdom Space Agency, the UKSA, and so excited about this. My fourth interview, actually, that I've had a chance to conduct with these folks. Sir, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Of course. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Craig Brown. I am the Director of Investment at the UK Space Agency.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to be talking, I believe, about the ESA Project Moonlight initiative, which is all about establishing communications and also navigation on the moon. So, the first question we're going to have, because a lot of people don't know anything about this, can you please explain Project Moonlight, or ESA Project Moonlight?
Yeah, of course, absolutely, my pleasure. So Moonlight's a really interesting initiative. One of the things that we've been doing over the last, decade is exploring the kind of more commercial areas of space. So naturally, that's lent us to look at telecoms, navigation. But for the first time, really, we have started to consider some of the more commercial opportunities around the lunar economy and exploration in general. But Moonlight specifically is looking at the crossover between the more commercial areas of space investment and the lunar economy. And so one of the things that we decided to invest in at the last ESA ministerial, which is the kind of point at which the various European Space Agency member states invest in the European Space Agency programs, we decided to take quite a strong leadership role within this new Moonlight program. So Moonlight is a European Space Agency initiative that coordinates the various member states with an interest in this commercial moon play. The UK invested the second largest amount in the Moonlight program, just behind the Italian Space Agency. And we plan on really capitalizing on some of the big technology investments that we've made in both telecoms and navigation, and to offer those services to companies, to countries that want to deliver moon missions. And as we know, more instruments are sent to the moon, and as we are looking at more robotic exploration and eventually human exploration of the moon, then we'll need the ability to deliver large amounts of communication signals back to Earth, and also to provide navigation on the moon's surface.
All right, so let's get into the implementation, right into the nuts and bolts of all of this. I mean, how many satellites is it going to take? Is it also going to require ground stations on the lunar surface? Are we talking about CubeSats or big sats? What's all going to be required?
So I guess the jury's still out as to the sort of infrastructure that will be required to deliver the sorts of services that will be ultimately commercially viable, because this is a real commercial play. So with that in mind, we will be using this program to explore the kind of infrastructure, so designing that infrastructure, doing the kind of system studies, I guess you'd say, to kind of understand what sort of infrastructure would be required to deliver these services and at what scale. I imagine that the market for the lunar economy is going to be a relatively slow ramp up. The infrastructure that will be sent to the moon will be scaled up accordingly. There's no point in delivering, terabits of capability to the moon when you haven't got that kind of market need. So I anticipate that we'll start up small and ramp up as need ramps up as well.
Thank you. Now, one of my viewers, he just kind of, and I'm curious what your response will be to this. He said that it would take approximately a minimum of 12 CubeSats for full coverage and also a main satellite feed. Would you feel that that's a pretty good assessment of the minimum requirements, or do you think it may need more or less?
Again, I wouldn't like to preempt the kind of outcome of that study. And it depends a little bit, I guess, on the type of communications that you want to deliver. So if you look at the capabilities of CubeSats and, say, optical communications, it's very limited to deliver significant data rates for optical communications using the CubeSat kind of scale of platform at the moment. That, of course, is going to change as more developments come in looking at miniaturizing optical comms. I would anticipate, though, that if we do need to provide significant data rates via optical communications from the moon, that we might have to go to larger platforms. That's not to say we can't use kind of traditional RF communications in the short term, but eventually I think optical communications will be of great interest. And again, CubeSats are great. They do lend themselves quite well to the startup space, but some of the companies that have an interest in delivering these sorts of communication services are perhaps more well established. It's quite surprising, actually, the number of well established primes and satellite operators with an interest in this market, because it really is quite a sizable market potentially over the coming decade.
Are you in a position to give any examples of those power players who are interested in lunar communications and navigation?
I don't think you'd be too surprised, actually, with some of the names. So, the kind of main primes in Europe, I'm not going to name names at the moment, but, there aren't that many. They all have a general interest in expanding their capabilities and services beyond Earth orbit. And again, equally, the kind of main operators in Europe, they all have an interest in this. So sorry, I can't be more specific at the moment, but I'm sure that information will come out in time.
No, I understand there's only so much you can tell us at the early stages of the program. Of course, being a journalist, I'm still going to ask the questions. But that being the case, given how many satellites are manufactured in the United Kingdom, do you feel that this is going to offer a new economic opportunity for Britain, given how many satellites Britain produces?
Yeah, I think so. We're always looking at the new large market opportunities that we can kind of point our industry towards, and the kind of lunar economy is shaping up to be reasonably sizable. A multi-billion-dollar market over the next decade. Some reports going as far as to suggest that $50 to $100 billion over the next decade. So we're talking about something quite sizable. A lot of countries, though, are kind of focusing more on the exploration of the lunar surface, so building the rovers, building moon bases and the like. And of course, we do have some activity towards that end in the UK. But I think that the kind of real interesting angle for us is on the infrastructure. It's on the support services, because that's a real strength in the UK, and it's not a massive leap, shall we say, to go from providing navigation and telecommunications around the Earth to doing that around the moon. It's just a little bit further away.
I have a question from one of my viewers. It actually may be kind of a multi-part. Are you going to implement, and this is very specific, so you may not even be able to tell me, wireless beaming technology so we can get telemetry readings from the dark side of the moon, having a higher relay satellite in an elliptical orbit and line of sight for optimal feeds and resolution with a similar system used by the James Webb Space Telescope in a way to map the dark side and getting a full documented surface of the moon. So I guess the long and the short of it is it your plan to fully map the dark side of the moon, which is something we really don't have yet?
Yeah, super interesting question. So I guess ultimately the services that are delivered by this program have to serve the science objectives. And so if there is a strong science objective to do that sort of exploration, then I think it makes some sense that services will be delivered for that sort of application. There have been some kind of a lot of mapping missions to the moon that have taken significant data of that side of the moon. But for sure, there's going to be a lot of scientific interest and exploration interest of that area. So sure, I mean, it'll all come out in the system study, really. So it's a little bit soon to say exactly the type of services that will be delivered. But to me, it makes some sense that will be, under strong consideration.
The other question that we have, this is actually from my producer, who's in Yorkshire, by the way. His question is, what do you hope to learn from this new communications network, and would any new technology potentially be applied to the deep space network to fix some of the delay tolerance issues afforded by an aging deep space network that we have right now?
Yeah, so not specifically as part of the Moonlight program, but certainly the precursor to it. The other kind of moon investments that we've made through the European Space Agency, one of the significant investments that we made was on the Deep Space Network, and we invested quite heavily in the Goonhilly Earth Station to make sure that we are able to deliver those sorts of ground station services to the moon. I anticipate that is going to be a significant component of whatever offer the UK has for the lunar economy going forward. So I mean, super interesting question. We do sometimes forget about the ground segment when we get excited about space, but of course it's fundamental to be able to deliver these sorts of services. So I'm up for making sure that the ground segment is covered. There's no point in doing the space without the ground.
Right. Okay, let me go through a couple of highlights on the as described under the ESA rollout, just to get an idea of some of the things that you're working on. Collaborative is one of the big things that's mentioned. Who are you collaborating with? I mean, you have Italy, you have ESA. What other nations and organizations are involved in this collaboration?
Quite a number. I can't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately, but there are around about, I don't know, between 8 and a dozen different nations that signed up to the Moonlight program. Most of the nations dropped maybe $1 or $2 million. I think there might have been one $10 million dollar investment, or euros, depending on which country you're in. Other than I guess Italy and the UK, most of the other nations are, I guess, looking to participate at a much lower level. So I'd say, UK and Italy are absolutely the front runners, and of course coordinated with the European Space Agency. But beyond Europe, of course, ultimately this is about the customer base. So the program itself is looking at pulling together technologies and systems from European contractors, but ultimately we'd be looking to sell this service to whoever wants to buy it from wherever they are in the world. So for sure, if we're able to offer broadband internet connectivity around the moon, and that there is a commercial company sitting in Silicon Valley somewhere, and they feel that they would like to use our network, then I'm sure that will be on offer.
Wonderful, thanks. Let's see some of the other things. One thing that cropped up, and this is sort of an unusual one in terms of the types of services that might be offered in the future, was the opportunity for gamers to steer lunar rovers on the surface of the moon. That one struck me as being very odd. I mean, is that a serious thing?
Lunar Robot Wars, sponsored by Xbox, I guess. No, that's a fun idea, isn't it? Ultimately, if this is a commercial offer and there are people who wish to do that, then assuming that we aren't kind of breaking any kind of regulations by offering remote piloting of private rovers on the moon, why not?
So, but I'm assuming no gaming organizations have actually expressed an interest or anything like that.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It was just an interesting thing, so that immediately occurred to me. Let me have a look at some of the other things that other services. Tell me a little bit about the advantages of real-time access to rovers, that sort of thing. How is your communications network going to make operating rovers in real time more efficient on the surface of the moon?
Yeah, we see a few trends, I guess. In space in general, exploration in general. So I guess you can extrapolate this answer not just about the moon, but also thinking about Mars exploration eventually. And of course, the further away you go, the harder it is to communicate in real time just through the laws of physics. And so, in a sense, this is a bit of a test bed for exploration of other planets. We could look to extend this further into the solar system in time. When it becomes more and more difficult to do real-time communications, things like automated traversing of the surface becomes more important. So artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are more and more employed by mission designers to make sure that they get the most out of their out of their systems. Kind of the human delay, if you like, in deciding things can really be an overhead. You want to make sure that you're as efficient and as you're using every spare minute on the surface of the moon to best advantage. So automating is really, really important, and so that kind of closed loop communication, I guess, becomes ever more important. And the other thing is a big trend in the amount of data that's consumed by instruments, or so say generated by instruments and by systems. The kind of bottleneck of traditional communications, I think, kind of limits a little bit the ambition of what we would like to achieve on the moon and by extension on Mars and other planets. And as a result, being able to offer much thicker pipe of communications on the moon really does open up new possibilities of exploration and new use cases, new uses. So that's really what it's about. It's about making sure that the sort of capability that we deliver on the moon kind of matches the capability on Earth ultimately, so that we can do everything that we can do with the limited time that we have.
All right, thank you. Now, of course, the vast majority of people who watch my channel are SpaceX fans. And so, I'm sure a lot of them are already thinking, well, why not deploy Starlink satellites or something similar to the moon and just take care of it that way? Is Europe exploring a collaboration with SpaceX, or are you more focusing on partners in Europe?
So at the moment, the Moonlight program is focused solely on European partners. I haven't heard of Elon's plans around lunar comms, and of course the Starlink form factor and capability is a really interesting one, and certainly would be an opportunity for SpaceX and of course other constellation providers. The sort of bus size, I think, lends itself quite well to this sort of application. I think at the moment, it's a little bit of a kind of a new market, emerging market. More and more players may get interested as the market is proven. But as we see with constellations around Earth, even as fast as Elon Musk can launch satellites into orbit, the appetite for data is still not sated. People will always require more data than is available from orbit, and it's one of the reasons why I'm very relaxed, shall we say, when it comes to the number of operators that are operating and delivering services on Earth. Eventually, I would imagine something similar around the moon. As more and more interest is generated and more companies want to perform lunar exploration, in the market, very well could expand large enough for multiple operators. At the moment, we're taking a bit more of a coordinated role across Europe, I think. So it's a competitive program. So we are expecting multiple companies to join together in a consortium to bid into this program, and we might see collaboration between multiple primes and multiple operators actually across both the UK and Italy, looking to deliver this service. So there's an element of cooperation. There will always be an element of competition, but ultimately it will be market driven.
Now, in terms of launch providers, are you guys is ESA being a launch provider agnostic about this? In other words, are you looking at the possibility of perhaps using Vegas to deploy some of these things, since you're collaborated with Italy? Is Arianespace, going to be handling most of this, in your opinion, or is this open to a lot of the emerging launch providers, including stuff out of Saxavord and Spaceport Cornwall, or is it everybody around the world, gets an equal shot at deploying these satellites? How do you foresee this is going to go?
Yeah, again, really interesting question. As you know, launch is a kind of a growing market opportunity in the UK as well, and we are focusing a fair bit of effort on making sure that we can launch from UK soil. I'm not too sure that the kind of rockets that we are developing for launch in the short term will be able to perform launches to the moon. We're looking predominantly at low Earth orbit launches from the UK, but eventually, who knows, if we can develop the right sort of infrastructure and the right sort of rockets to launch from the UK, Absolutely nothing stopping us from looking at that. I'm not too sure what the European Space Agency policy is specifically around launch of Moonlight. Of course, European Space Agency prefers to use Arianespace when it can. As we know, there aren't that many Ariane launches compared to SpaceX at the moment. SpaceX are by far the largest launch provider, and there is, of course, the limit on our ability to launch, from Russia due to the Ukraine conflict. So it does limit our options for launch to a degree. I think it's a little bit early to say at the moment. We're a little bit far away from launching Moonlight satellites, and a lot of things can change within that time. And of course, Vega has its own teething problems, and we'll be hoping that those are solved somewhat by the time these things launch. But again, I'm not too sure what Vega's launch capability is to the moon, and whether or not it makes commercial sense to use such a small launcher for a lunar mission. I personally am a little bit more agnostic as to where these things are launched from and who we launch with, so long as it's the right launch at the right time, at the right price. And I think that price is going to be super important when it comes to closing the business case for these folks.
No doubt, and just more of a statement than a question here. One of the things that you're probably aware of is the fact that Virgin Orbit is adding a third stage and ion power to their launcher one. If and when they return to Britain, which will give them interplanetary capability with CubeSats anyway. Yeah. So I'm curious. I would assume that if you're agnostic, assuming they have something that could put a CubeSat in orbit around the moon, people like them might have an opportunity as well.
Yeah, sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, we've got a lot of in-orbit servicing capability in the UK, and part of that is space tugs and orbit raising of missions, and getting people and getting satellites to the right orbit. Absolutely interplanetary transfer using space tugs. I'm all for it.
Last question, just for an exciting thought, I think, to just about every spaceflight enthusiast, and even I would say the average person. Do you foresee an opportunity in the future through this network to provide real-time access to the lunar surface for astronauts exploring the lunar surface, so that people on Earth can follow these Artemis astronauts in their future missions? Do you foresee that this is something that can be done in real time?
Yeah, I think that's the end goal, isn't it? I think that's the direction of travel. We are being guided by the science and exploration plans of lunar exploitation. Making sure that we have the right communications infrastructure for whatever application is going to be used on the moon's surface, I think is really what's critical here.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Very exciting program, and I look forward to following it and covering it as things develop.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. Once again, the United Kingdom, in collaboration with Italy and the European Space Agency, providing a key part of the necessary infrastructure that it's going to take for us to return to the moon to stay. Again, emphasizing the importance of international collaboration if this ambition is to be successful. Thanks very much for watching. Please please subscribe to my channel. Also check the description for various ways to support my content, so I can keep it coming to you. And as always, stay angry about space.